All right. We sent him to the Summer League, and as usual, he crushed it. Jason Timpf, hoops tonight. So I thought Wemby's first performance was a lot of jitters. The idea at 19 of going into a foreign country and be the star attraction against guys who are literally trying to make the league and are fighting for their survival and roster spot. He knows he's already going to make the team. So I thought it was kind of predictable that he would struggle. It was choppy. I got to tell you though, when I watched him today, his size is just so impactful. There's just no way around it. He's gonna have 25-point nights. So let's start with the difference you saw, Jason. Game 1, game 2. What jumped out to you?
This is so funny to me. That news cycle was objectively hilarious. It's like, okay, here's this guy who already has been good against pros in France, who already was great against the G League Ignite team, like destroyed them in 2 games in America a few months back, in like 1 game in Summer League, and everyone was rewriting whether or not this prospect was worth all of the hype. And then big shock, he comes out with 27 and 12 with 3 blocks today. The big thing that stood out to me was just process. Like, honestly, I looked over at Carson and Logan, our Nerd Sesh guys, right before the game, and I'm like, I wonder if they're gonna play basketball or just throw him the ball and let him play ISO pickup ball. And that's what they did in that first game. First several possessions, he's just standing on the wing, dribbling like he's Kevin Durant against Kai Jones. And that's literally the hardest way to play basketball. And, I kind of did a little thing on my show today. Every young player has a floor and a ceiling, and their floor is mainly based on what they're already great at. And then their ceiling is based on whether or not they can address their weaknesses. He has things that he's great at. He's the greatest combination of height and length and coordination of any center that we've ever seen. He's already got great defensive instincts and a good amount of offensive polish. So if you play easy basketball with him, he will excel. There was a sequence at the end of this game where he set a ball screen, there was a switch, he flashed to the middle of the floor. They threw him the ball, and he just quick shot a little turnaround fadeaway over his right shoulder to make it, to get it back to 4. Very next possession, the guy drives along the left side. The rim protector gets occupied. He just relocates to the left wing and takes a wide open catch and shoot 3, and he makes it to get it back to 1. I'm like, this is what it's going to look like in San Antonio. Real basketball, where he has an opportunity to demonstrate what he's great at. And I'm not surprised at all that he popped in that setting. I thought all of the reaction to game 1 was really misplaced, disrespectful to what he's already accomplished as a pro, and just it was predictable that he would bounce back the way he did today.
Yeah, in the game 1 and game 2, there was a moment where somebody ripped the ball out of his hands. And I do think, like, if somebody said to me, like, what's the one glaring weakness? I would say weakness. He's 19. Yeah. Like, guys are, he put the ball up a couple times and guys just grabbed it and pulled it out of his hands. And it's like, yeah, you can tell when you start looking at these veteran NBA guys, they look like they've been in a professional weight room for 7 years. Like, it's just different definition. So if you told me, like, I could see them building a schedule and saying, and I said this with OKC, they should do it for Chet Holmgren. 58 games, just take some road trips off. Stay home, lift weights for 4 days instead of that 2-team road trip to say, Houston, Orlando, stay home. Eat, work out, try to make as many home games as you can, right? And have a limited road schedule. Not that you don't need to go on the road, but there'll be times I just want him to stay home, sleep, eat, lift, and play 58 games. And I feel that way with Wemby. It's like, obviously he has his motors running. I mean, when you were 19, you could polish off 2 turkey sandwiches, glass of milk, 2 cookies. Hour later, you're starving, right? Like, that's who he is. He's 19. He's going to burn 7,000 calories. And it's like, the only thing I look at, I think he just needs to get stronger. He needs just nights off. Because, I've talked to NBA guys about this. You start burning calories when you're 19, 20, 21, 22. It's hard to keep weight on. If you're playing 40 a night in this, because these guys, a lot of these guys, Jason, especially college guys, they didn't play any defense in college. You match up zones and you kind of guard a space. It's the first time you've had to guard a guy. So, like, it is a whole different ballgame. So I think he's just going to get a little bit stronger. But there were a couple, when he did those back-to-back dunks, there are these moments of, like, he's just going to get some. Like you know when a player's great? When you perfectly defend them and they score. Like length is undefeated. Like it just wins all the time. If Durant's 6'8", he's not the same player. He's just really, really good. And I will tell you this, he's a really gracious kid. Like I think he's really grateful for it. And I think it matters. I'm going to throw a theory really quickly. So Popovich got lucky. Robinson, Duncan, like the nicest guys in the world, right?
Yeah.
Then he gets Kawhi, who's difficult, right? And he leaves. And he says to himself, I'm not doing that. Wemby has got an old school, grateful personality a little old school, right? And the foreign players, as we've discussed, come into the country and they're very appreciative. It's new. All visitors are more polite, right? You go overseas, I do. We're more polite. I think he's been waiting for the next, just happens to be an international player. I think they're going to do really well. I think this is going to be Popovich's third run. Do you?
Absolutely. I mean, the beauty of having a personality like that at a position like that, if you think about Duncan, is it makes it really easy to bring different types of volatile ball handlers around him. Because not only is he unassuming, he's your foundational piece. He's the guy that you build your entire defense around. On offense, he's the guy that's going to pick and pop to the top of the key or to beat switches with smaller guys. He'll bury them in the post. But he actually needs a primary ball handler. And so when you have a guy like that who also has a great attitude, it's going to make it really easy to find players that want to play with him. I really like the point you made about putting on weight because I've never thought about it that way in terms of cutting back his playing time as a vehicle with which to put on muscle because it is so difficult to maintain weight, let alone gain weight during a basketball season. Every year I'd go into the season at like 227, 229, and I'd come out of the season like 217, 219 because like all you're doing is playing and playing and sweating and playing and working out and going to class and like you just don't ever have an opportunity to do what it takes to keep the weight on until you get to the off season. So I like that idea of kind of like minimizing his workload as an opportunity to put on weight and to help avoid injuries. But it's funny because the ceiling with him is completely ridiculous, right? The crazy high level shot making, the one-legged 3-point shot that he takes from the top of the key that he actually made quite a bit when he was in Europe, all the stuff that he can do defensively. But overnight, he's going to be really good in ways that impact winning in terms of rim protection. He closed out a ton of possessions at the end of that game, just snatching defensive rebounds over the top of everybody. Getting to the foul line, he shot 12 free throws tonight just because when he reaches to shoot over the top of people, they go for the ball and they get forearm because they're just not close to where he is, right? But here's the thing. He's not going to win Rookie of the Year, most likely, because it's going to be someone like Scoot Henderson, someone that's going to put up a ton of numbers, that's going to pop earlier in their career with the way that their skill set goes. He's going to be the kind of guy that all year long people are going to be looking for opportunities to minimize what he's doing. This is the dude that 5 to 10 years from now has the potential to be both the best offensive player in the league and the best defensive player in the league. That is the ultimate ceiling there, but that will take time. He's not someone that's necessarily going to pop statistically early on. And so I hope people treat him with that level of fairness. But as far as Popovich goes, and I don't know if you saw, there's kind of a caveat there where like he may not actually stay on and coach that whole time because he's also the president of basketball operations. So they might work something out where they phase him out, but then maybe he can pick the successor at that point. But because of his specific personality and his skill set, they're going to be able to find pieces to surround him with. People are going to want to play with this guy. I think the Spurs are going to be relevant for the next decade.
Well, they did a study years ago. I think it was the University of Copenhagen, and they had people work out 90 minutes a day and 30 minutes a day. And what they found is the people that worked out only 30 minutes a day lost more weight. How? Because they weren't as tired. They would take the steps. They wouldn't nap later. They wouldn't eat as much. So what happens is, think about, so moderate exercise is actually can be very, very healthy, especially as you age. Mm-hmm. Think about 2.5 hours of an NBA game. You burn 9,000 calories. Wemby gets off the court, power shake, sleeps on the plane. So you think to yourself, just think about what that physical beating does to you. it really eliminates the chance to put weight on because you're resting constantly. You're exhausted. And instead of, like I always say this about college guys, they play 36 games, regional travel, 82 national. They're sleeping all day. And it's just like, well, they can't put weight on. Well, they play, they do smoothies, and they fall asleep. Like they're not eating full meals. And so I think it's a real thing. And also Giannis, Embiid early. When you're 7'2", you're thin. It's Ralph Sampson. Some guys have never been able to put weight on. Ben Simmons is still, just like you wish he put, at times. So I think with Wemby, it's just like, I think you put him on a game limit, keep him home sometimes, double down on stuff, give him more rest, give him an opportunity. There's nothing wrong with just sitting home, card loading, watching the game, breaking down film. Summer is heating up, and so is pro baseball. You can certainly watch your favorite baseball team on television, but there is nothing like being at the ballpark to watch your favorite team. For last minute, amazing deals to see your favorite baseball team live. Check out Game Time, the fastest growing ticket app in the United States. And it doesn't stop in sports. July means huge summer concerts and huge comedy shows all over the country. And Game Time is the place. They have all your tickets. Download the Game Time app and the redeem code Colin. That's me, COLIN, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, it's simple. Download the Game Time app, and the code is COLIN. And with it, you get $20 off. $20. No matter where you live, wherever. Go out and have some fun this week. Download Game Time today. It's so easy. Last minute tickets, concerts, Major League Baseball, lowest prices, guaranteed. Okay, so I want to go to this. It's really been something, and I like Damian Lillard a lot, but he's not a villain, and he'll play hard anywhere he goes. I do bristle, and I just don't think it's good for the NBA. I bristle at I'm only going to play at Miami because wherever Dame goes, he's going to be the first or second best player. And, if he went to Philadelphia and he was great, it's not like he wouldn't play hard. And I do think it's good for the league when franchises get the most they can when they lose a star. It creates some sort of competitive balance. You don't want people like stars leaving and they go into the tank. You want stars leaving and the other team get somewhat fortified so they remain viable. So where do you fall on? I mean, again, I'm an NBA guy. I've always understood the NBA and international soccer are star leagues. They're not driven by coaches. People say the NBA just runs through coaches. Go watch international soccer. Look at our United States men's national team. We're just running through coaches. It's star-driven. One player can tip the scale. I mean, if Mahomes had a bad O-line or a bad coach, he'd be a 500 quarterback. Like, you need even a great quarterback. Basketball, LeBron was going to get to the playoffs regardless of who the teammates were. I just don't love the optics of it for Dame in the league. What say you?
The optics are awful, and I really blame the agents for this because it's like everyone knows Dame wants to go to Miami, and so do the other 28 teams. So, like, making a phone call and being like, by the way, he's not going to show up to training camp. All these guys know Dame. They know he's a professional. They know he'd show up to camp. It's like the Kawhi Leonard thing in 2019. Exact same situation. I'm going to LA. Reports coming out that he might not report to training camp, and then Toronto bravely steps in and takes a risk, and they end up getting him and winning a championship. Kawhi played some of his best basketball for Toronto. Actually, I did a whole thing today. I really want the Oklahoma City Thunder to put their name in the Dame hat. I'm not sure if you saw it, but Woj reported yesterday they have 35 draft picks in the next 7 years. 15 first-round draft picks. I worked it out. They'd have to wait a couple months because of some CBA rules, but they can basically take a bunch of their salary filler that they picked up in random deals this summer, not have to send out a single young player, put 4 or 5 of those draft picks on the table and go get Dame and run out Damian Lillard, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Lou Dort with Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren and instantly be one of the most talented teams in the league. I'd love to see something like that. But the point is all these teams already know. Like OKC knows. Dame wants to be in Miami. So it's a risk. We would have to bring Dame in and effectively be like, hey, man, we're a good organization. Let us show you how we do things around here. Give us an opportunity to show you how we do things. We can help you reach your basketball ceiling. That's what Toronto did with Kawhi. That's always been the game. The problem I have with it is the agents have gotten involved and they've made it nasty. Now you're throwing out these empty threats that no one believes, that makes Dame look like he's a jerk when he's not. And as far as the whole asking for a trade thing, even Portland knew when Dame signed that extension that he was likely going to ask for a trade. These players have to take the financial security. You're a free agent. You're committed to that team at least for the next year or two, but you're not going to pass on 5 years. You're not going to. Because you take a 2-year deal, you land awkwardly and tear your ACL, that can cost you $100 million. So like these guys have to take the money. As long as they're requesting the trade in the offseason and not in the middle of the season the way Kyrie did, I don't really have a problem with it, but it looks really bad with the agents. And honestly, Colin, I don't know what the answer is because the agents are doing their job, so to speak, by mucking things up and making it nasty. And they're obligated to their clients to try to get them where they need to go. The NBA doesn't have any leverage over those guys. I don't know how they can stop it, but it definitely is a bad look. I'm okay with players requesting trades. I'm okay with them saying they want to go to one place. There's a risk. Another team might jump in and trade for you anyway. But there's no doubt that this looks bad. It's going to start turning off regional fan bases. It's going to start hurting that regional television audience. And I don't think it's good for the long-term health of the league, even if it's morally correct, if that makes sense.
Pivot back to the summer league. Scoot Henderson got hurt in game 1. He's going to be really good. You know, I've always tried to defend NBA GMs and scouts. You have sometimes, it's almost though the international players now are easier to scout than college players because at least they play against men. So it's like, it's easier. It feels like the international guys in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been like no major whiffs. Like if they can score against men, they can score. In the college game, you watch a Big Ten player and you're like, well, he's scoring against a non-NBA player. I mean, Jaden Ivey, to me, you could see he was dynamic. You're like, yeah, that's going to work in the NBA. He's going to be a good player. So in the brief time you saw Scoot Henderson, your interpretation of what you saw?
Spitting image of Russell Westbrook. He's built like a truck. He's way stronger even than Russ was at that phase of his career. The rim pressure is insane. When he just gets going in transition, you can see the entire defense kind of collapse around the basket. He's especially good at hitting guys out of the dunker spot. That's a Russ thing. You got to put him with a big man that can catch and finish around the basket. He actually did hit some nice pull-up jump shots early in the game, but there is a little bit of that lack of the change-up, and that's always going to be the thing that could derail him. Again, Scoot has a chance to be the guy that breaks the mold, but he has to pay attention to the roadmap where some of his contemporaries went off the tracks. You've got to have a change up. You can't play the same style all the time. You have to commit to the defensive end of the floor. He is capable of being an outstanding defensive player with his strength and his like physical build. And then last but not least, you've got to get in the gym. Don't be that guy who, when your athleticism starts to tail off, you start to tail off because you don't have the skill set to make up for it. You know, his competitiveness popped when I was watching him. You can see the way he interacts with his teammates, the way he interacts with the people he's competing against. He's jawing at the other team. He's got the fire. He's got the competitiveness, but he has to follow that roadmap because, as we've said, that's a specific archetype of player that has had really hot starts and then flamed out pretty consistently, and I don't want that to happen for him.
That's something you pointed out. It's really smart. And it even matters in my business. I have said this before. If you're a talk radio host, you can't just be a flamethrower. You've got to be sometimes funny. Sometimes you've got to be inquisitive, curious. Sometimes you can throw a fastball. Sometimes you have to be self-deprecating. And I think in basketball, I think John Wall, to me, had one speed. Like it was just out of control. And Westbrook at times, kind of one speed. And I think with Scoot, I see a little bit of the same thing. Now, some of it is he can develop that. But I think it's really hard when you're very successful at something and you blow past everybody for people to say, hey, slow down. We want you to play with more pacing. It's like Tyson. Like, why do I need a jab? I'm knocking everybody out in the second round. Like, what's a jab for? So I think what happens to and we've seen this pattern, that they dominate people. And it's like the running quarterback, high school, college. He runs around. First 2 years in the NFL, Josh Allen runs around. And then all of a sudden he gets hit. And it's like, oh, I got to stay in the pocket. And so I think what Scoot is so dynamic, sometimes your gift is your curse, that he's so dynamic that it's hopefully he's super coachable. And I think Westbrook, I'm not saying he's not coachable, but nobody could stay in front of Russ for 10 years. Like, you see why it's not a shock that many of the great shooters are not super twitchy and fast, because at some point pulling up was that's how they scored, right? Like, for you're obviously a very athletic guy. But if I would have told you, if I'd have added 8 inches to your vertical, your jumper wouldn't be as good. You'd be like, guys, I'm going to the basket again. And also there's an alpha to scoring at the rim that is just like adrenaline. So I hope he develops it, but I think it's a really good point by you that it is hard when you succeed at something and these dynamic guards with no hand check can't stand in front of them at all. Michael Jordan could not have stayed in front of any of these guys. None of them. So was there anybody else in Summer League that you looked at and went, oh, that's interesting?
So a couple things. Brandon Miller had some moments. The polish is there. That Charlotte Summer League roster played some of the ugliest basketball I've ever seen, so I want to see him play in a different type of environment. Both the Thompson twins really popped with their playmaking. They were both in roles where they were playing with a lot of other ball handlers, so they didn't get much opportunity to show what they can do. I thought the most impressive guy I saw this weekend was Jabari Smith Jr. Now, I don't know if you noticed this, but last year there was some hype over whether or not Jabari Smith was going to go first. Now, Paolo went number 1, and he's been great, obviously. Chet went number 2. Chet looked awesome on Saturday, by the way. But Jabari Smith Jr. went number 3. And a big reason why is he could not dribble to save his life, and he couldn't make a shot anywhere outside of a catch and shoot situation. He destroyed the Pistons today and hit that game winner in the game on Friday. He had 38 points, hit a bunch of pull-up jump shots. He was talking shit to James Wiseman and just putting on a show in front of the crowd. It's been the most remarkable improvement in scoring polish from a player I've seen in 1 year in my entire time covering basketball. I can't believe it. He was literally the most uncomfortable guy last year that I saw in Vegas. He's been the most comfortable guy on the floor this season. He's 6'10" with a 7'1" wingspan, projects to be an excellent defensive player. He's put on a ton of muscle. He was bullying Jaden Ivey today. He's got all the pull-up jump shot stuff going. Houston is going to be a really interesting team this year because they brought in some veteran presences. With Fred VanVleet, you're going to have Jalen Green there, Dylan Brooks there. Between Dylan Brooks and Jabari Smith and their ability to guard, Houston, overnight's going to become a really entertaining team to watch. But Jabari Smith Jr. was by far the most impressive guy that I saw this weekend.
The NBA has this in-season tournament. And basically what they're doing is designating Tuesday and Friday games. They want them to be more urgent and more important, so fewer players will sit out. And they'll have it won't affect the standings. There'll be a separate standings from as far as I can tell. And if you do well in those games, you will eventually get into this early mid-December tournament. I think the simpler you make things, the easier it is for sports fans, right? Do you think it matters? I mean, it'd be great if you didn't have to ask players to play. But that's the reality. The analytics in basketball are telling you to give veteran players, more time off. Do you think it's instructive? Do you think it benefits? Do you think it pops? Your takeaway on it?
I'm trying really hard to keep an open mind, to be clear. But I heard your podcast with Nick Wright the other day. I listened to it on the plane, and you said something I thought was really interesting. You're like, you need 2 things to be successful as a professional sports league. You need stars and you need urgency. And the NFL crushes everybody because they have both. And the NBA has stars, and that allows them to overcome their lack of urgency. But the only problem, I'd say there's a mild problem with officiating they got to work out. There's a mild problem we were talking about with the star trade requests and some of the behavior of these agents. But the main problem is urgency. And this looks like a move in the direction away from that. And, I was watching Ted Lasso this summer with my wife, and they, have been learning about the English Premier League as a result. They have this thing called the FA Cup, and it's like this tournament that they play in the middle of their season. But there's a prestige that has been built around that tournament over many, many years. And so I don't see how that prestige exists right away over something called the FA Cup. Now there is the NBA Cup. Now there is a undisclosed benefit to the players. But when stars determine the outcomes of games and stars are making $50 million, I'm not sure there's a monetary value there that's going to really get people interested in competing. But I'm trying really hard to keep an open mind. At the end of the day, though, if someone asked me what needed to happen with the NBA, an overhaul with officiating, and then shorten the season to 66 games so that you can stretch the games out so that players aren't resting on back-to-backs, there would be an increase in viewership due to urgency and star participation. And then from there, that would make up for the drop in games. That's the direction the league needs to go, and they're just never going to do it. And this, to me, just feels like a strange measure in that direction.
I always appreciate Adam Silver's willingness to be progressive and move the ball ahead. David Stern did it on occasion, had a couple of whiffs. The dress code was sort of insulting. The new ball was just a complete miss. You may want to tell the players you're coming out with that. But I've always thought, that there's the old saying, the NBA thinks of it first, the NFL gets it right, and baseball makes the most money on it. The NBA always comes up with new ideas, and I totally appreciate it. And I do think we live in a distracted society. NBA fans are young. They're on their phones. It's a highlight culture. Always has been a bit in the NBA. So I'm not against it. I want to see it. People bang on the play-in tournament, but I've kind of liked it. Miami was a play-in team that was trailing in their second play-in game. So, people like to complain about new stuff. Like, I think the play-in works. I like the play-in tournament. Yeah, I like it. It's more good. It's more urgent games that I have to. I mean, those are Tuesday night games, and I'm like, the Warriors could be out, or the Heat could be out of the playoffs. So I am willing to give the midseason tournament, and it's not really midseason. That's kind of the name, but I'm willing to give it a shot.
Early season.
Finally. Early season. So I said this, that there was a story this week. The Knicks had talked to the Clippers about Paul George, and they bailed on it. And I said 5 years ago they would have done it. 10 years ago they would have done it. They would have panicked. They panicked on Carmelo. They could have traded him after the season. They did in season, and Denver got a boatload, right? Because in season trades, Melo's like, I want to play for the Knicks. Knicks caved. Stoudemire from Phoenix had bad knees. Everybody in the league knew it. They needed a star. That never worked out. Paul George is a really good two-way player, but Steve Ballmer, I've been told by a source in that building, is not going to extend him, does not want to. There's no reason for you to give him a 4 or 5 year deal. I do think he would be a 2 or a 1 on that team. And my takeaway was, it's really an encouraging sign. The Knicks are a good team. They're not very good, but they're good. 1 smart move, they could get to very good. 2, they could be special. So let's not demand they make 2 in one off season. Let's go from good to very good. Brunson's still young. A lot of their players are young. Even Julius Randle's not old. So there's Zion rumors, Karl Anthony Towns. If I said, and they're very lucky, they have 11 first-round picks in 7 years. They have a lot of guys I like, Josh Hart, RJ Barrett. I don't love, I like. They're movable. They have length. Randall's contract and Brunson's contract, Jalen shrinks year to year. Like, it's one of the better contracts in the league now. So if I said to you, Zion, Karl Anthony Towns, if there was a move to be made, Jason, what would you do?
Again, it can't just be a star. It has to be the right star. I mean, this is the problem that Dallas could find themselves running into. We need to get a star. We need to get a star. Okay, we got Kyrie. Well, everything hinges on that now. If Kyrie has a change of heart and demands out, you're screwed because you have nothing left. And now Luka's going to want out, right? And that's the key, is like, you pull the trigger on a Paul George trade and he gets hurt, everything is messed up. So you got to wait for the right guy. I'd be keeping an eye out for like a Brandon Ingram over the course of the next couple of years. If New Orleans decides that they want to stick with Zion, but they want to flip their timeline a little bit, and they think Trey Murphy's going to play some of those minutes alongside Herb Jones or whatever. I'd keep an eye out for a guy like, let's say OKC wants to pay all these guys, and they pay Shea and they pay Chet and they pay Josh Giddey, and they're like, Jalen Williams is the guy we're going to let go. Maybe New York jumps on a guy like that. It's got to be the right guy. I like Paul George, but the best indicator of future performance is past performance, and the dude is hurt all the time. And so there's a huge risk there. And so if you put all your chips in that basket, it could backfire on you. Actually, my sneaky favorite Paul George team right now is the Cavs because I hate their whole 2-guard build. I would look to flip Darius Garland for Paul George because then you're bringing in a player that kind of fits alongside that Donovan Mitchell timeline. It kind of addresses a specific need on their roster. Max Strus kind of slots in at the 2. I really love that fit. And then Darius Garland is a foundational piece for the Clippers, who have desperately needed a point guard ever since Chris Paul left. But for a team like New York, if you look at Jalen Brunson, where he's at in his career, Julius Randle clearly is the guy they'll inevitably move. You've got some solid role players. You've got a good center in Mitchell Robinson that you can build around. It just has to be the right guy. And to your point, that's a sign of competency that they're not just jumping on the next thing that comes around. They're being patient, and I do like to hear that.
Jason Timpf, Hoops Tonight. We sent him to the Summer League. Listen to his podcast. As always, my man, good seeing you.
It's good to see you too, Colin.